Hello, I wanted to give you some notes about writing in the style of the moment as you compose your own moment essays over the weekend, and you'll be ready to bring those in next week. Bear in mind a couple of key points. I'll go through this slideshow that it illuminates a couple of the points that I really want to make, particularly two things that I want you to get notes on. One is the pattern of the moment, and the other was the use of descriptive language in essays that work really well. So let's have a look at some of these. First, the pattern itself. The pattern involves starting off with a striking statement. Immediately after that, we set the scene. The author gives us the context. Then the narrative takes place. That's where the author tells the story. The moment in there is made quite clear. And at the close, either the author will tell us the outcome and how it affected them, or often the author will leave it to us to figure out what the effects have been, but we can usually get that from clues that are in the story. Here's some good examples of striking statements from essays that are in the book, The Moment. One starts like this. Behind our house was a shed, not just any shed, a magic shed. I was shooting hoops with my brother in the backyard when I heard the screams. I hadn't planned on getting pregnant. I was taking the pill and never missed a day. Or this. I sat in the window seat of the airplane on the eve of my 25th birthday, clutching a pill bottle and waiting for death to take over. After that, the authors set the scene. Here's some examples. Behind our house was a shed, not just any shed, a magic shed. Growing up, whenever I wanted to buy anything, a new shirt, an action figure, a bike, I got the same response from my father. I have one in the shed, he'd say with great certainty, gazing off as if mentally locating its exact position inside. The disturbing part about this wasn't just that he was keeping me from getting new things, but that he was right. Or this example. From I sat in the window seat of the airplane on the eve of my 25th birthday, clutching a pill bottle and waiting for death to take over. A feeling of impending doom left me paralyzed with fear or sent me into a full-blown panic attack whenever I set foot in a small, confined space. Then the authors go into the narrative. Here are some examples. Oh, and remember, tell the story. The length doesn't necessarily matter, but the pacing is what's really important. The moment I woke up in the hospital, I knew I was hurt bad. I also knew I'd blown it beyond belief. I knew any Olympic opportunity was gone, everything I'd worked so hard for, but for some reason that didn't matter because I was alive and I knew I was lucky. There are bigger things than the Olympics. I was so close to being paralyzed, but I could walk, and I was alive. Then make the moment clear. The messenger sighed and the air became thick. After a few seconds, she stepped forward and whispered, She said, I hate Haley because she's black and I hate black people. My stomach dropped. She hated me just because of my skin? Or this one. It's beautiful, I said, and even now, so many years later, I remember a kind of silence that hung in the room for a moment. Had I ever defended my sister before? Had I ever challenged my mother's authority? And then, as I said, in the closing, you'll tell the outcome, like these examples. The moment blurs in my memory after that. I don't even remember if Renee kept the dress and wore it, big bow prominently displayed, but I do remember a startling sensation as I stood in the doorway. I felt big. I felt superhero strong. I tucked that new power deep inside me and walked away. Or you can let the reader figure it out. In that moment when I woke up, I also thought, I'm still here, so I must have something more to do on this earth. Not as if I'm going to save the world, but I felt that I was kept around for a reason. I get the feeling I have quite a bit more to do while I'm alive. I just don't know what that is yet. And this is the author of Fluke. Again, to recap, the pattern is to start with a striking statement, give us the context, tell the narrative, make the moment clear in the narrative, and then in the closing, either tell the outcome, like in the stories called Trash or Fearless Flyer, or leave it to the reader to figure it out, such as in the stories called Someday or Missed Call. The second point I wanted to emphasize is the use of descriptive language and how it can make a story so immeasurably rich. Sensory details are really essential, so we need details that can appeal to our sense of hearing, taste, touch, smell, or sight. Figures of speech can really help to illuminate the points that we want to make by giving us strong comparisons that make us think. Mixing in languages help with a lot of the stories that deal with what we call bicultural families, families that are made up of more than one culture where they speak more than one language. Descriptive words, especially adjectives and adverbs, when used carefully and precisely, really can help. So let's see some examples of descriptive language. I said sensory details, they can add depth. This is from a story called Trash by Rigoberto Gonzalez. I was distracted by the echo of the insult and by the truth that ours was the poorest branch of the family tree. So when I came upon a dumpster, it seemed quite logical, mechanical even, that I dropped the lumpy trash bag into its huge square mouth. Dissatisfied with the quickness of the gesture, I rolled back around to empty the contents over the spoils of fly-infested waste. This is Rigoberto Gonzalez. I also mentioned that figures of speech, these include symbols, personification, metaphors, and similes, can add a lot of meaning and they can help the reader think about what you're saying, like in this example from Wicked Start by Gregory Maguire. I left the glove on a post so some child with a cold hand might have a chance of reclaiming it. I didn't need the glove. I had shaken hands with inspiration. Some child who cared for those characters as I cared for them was wandering about in the world, as we all are, a little lost and in danger of coming face to face with wickedness. This is Gregory Maguire. I also mentioned that mixing languages can add some variety, such as this excerpt from Disappointment by Nevenka Krzakovic. I smell the familiar meal as I yank open the door to climb the familiar stairs at the back of the garage. Mamatu-sam, I call up from the bottom step. I am here. And here's the author. And descriptive words, as I mentioned, adjectives and adverbs will enrich your writing, like this example from Memento Mori by Adam Terenli Wrench. I arrived and found him asleep in a blanket of broken bottles. I woke him and he crawled to his soiled bed, nothing else in his room but a few dozen empty bottles and a broken stereo. I cleaned up what I could, but after an hour, I gave up. There was too much for one person. The bags kept breaking. The stench was unbearable. And there's the author now. So a reminder, sensory details can add depth to your writing. Figures of speech, as we see here, they add a lot of meaning and they help people think about what you're writing. Mixed languages can add variety and change the pacing of a story. Descriptive words, adjectives, and adverbs, when chosen well, can really enrich your writing. And that's it. I look forward to seeing what you have to say on Tuesday.